It's that time of the year and your boy has you covered. We're back with a complete attacking tutorial for EAFC 24. This is going to be a hard fought, grinded out tutorial with blood, sweat and tears, but what I can say is, if we can smash 500 likes in the next week, I will drop a complete defending tutorial for you guys in EAFC 24. How to finish in EAFC? Well, it's going to be a hefty segment, but what I want to say about finishing this year is it's rather balanced. We have far post finishing now with this specific post. In previous years, it may have been the most overpowered and it may have been the most viable post to aim towards when it comes to scoring goals. However, as I said, it's rather balanced this year, and when it comes to far post finishing, you will find yourself in most situations where far post will be the most viable post. It might be when you're running towards the goal and you see that the far post is more open to the near post. It may be a viable option. Keepers will save them every now and then, but if you get yourself into a fairly decent body position like I'm going to teach you later on in this tutorial, well, you will find that you will score the goal the majority of the time. When it comes to near post finishing, it is very viable this year, especially if you're in the near post sweet spot area, which is around halfway between the dot shot and the edge of the 18-yard box, or the side of the 18-yard box, and then halfway between the byline and the edge of the 18-yard box. If you find yourself in this situation, you will be able to finish near post a lot of the time. I find keepers do struggle to keep near post shots out. And if I'm going to summarize finishing this year in a T, as I was saying, it's rather balanced. There's not necessarily a post that is more overpowered to shoot towards or more viable to shoot towards this year compared to last year's, where let's say FIFA 16 was more viable to shoot near post, but if you look at FIFA 20, far post was the most viable option. The power up shot finish in EAFC 24, it's back and it's better than ever, simply because there's not as much of a run up with each player. We have almost an instantaneous shot with this technique. To perform it, you need to just hold in L1 and R1. When it comes to shooting, the player will line up and lace the ball. It's called the power up shot. It's very, very effective, and even better this year in EAFC 24, simply because there is no delay in the shot. But when it comes to aiming the power up shot, this is where the actual skill gap exists, because it can be rather hard to aim the power up shot if you don't steady your thumb. Now, I have a technique that I taught on the channel last year, and it's still viable this year in EAFC, and that is the thumb stabilizer technique. To ensure that you get your power up shots on target, you want to aim the left stick towards the center of the goal, and then as the player lines up to shoot, you want to then slightly maneuver it to the side of the goal that you want to shoot. What this will do is allow you to aim it on target and then slightly take it to the side of the keeper, where you'll be able to slot it in near or far post. The trouble with aiming towards the post that you want to aim towards from the initial starting time that you aim with your thumb is it can be rather hit and miss when it comes to hitting it on target. But if you aim down the center, rotate your thumb slightly to the side that you want to shoot, it will allow you to aim a lot better with the power up shot. Low driven shots, yet again, they're back. Would I say they're more viable than last year in FIFA 23? I wouldn't. I find the keepers do save them more often than not. Compared to last year, low drivens were actually rather effective, especially inside the box. Keepers had trouble saving them, but this year I find with certain animations that EA have added in, with hypermotion X2, keepers have no trouble getting their foot down to save it, especially if they have save with feet trait. But to perform low driven shots, you want to tap the shoot button and have under 40% power on the bar. This will allow you to low driven the shot into the corner, and the post that I recommend you guys low drivening to is the far post. I find near post doesn't work as well, so far post is very viable when it comes to low driven shots. First time shots, I mean, you remember back in the day in FIFA 19, they were absolute nightmares. Are they the same This year, no, they are not. But what I will say is it can be viable after you've done an extra pass or after you lay it off to a player, let's say just outside the 18-yard box to lace the ball. Would I first time shot the majority of the time? No, I wouldn't. It's not FIFA 19 days, as I was saying. It's a new game, a new era, and they are not as overpowered as previous years. But they can be viable, especially if you think taking a touch will not allow you enough time to get the shot off in the bots or outside the bots. It's all fun and games until you have that game where you have 20 shots and 0 goals, and people wonder to themselves, well, I'm taking all the finishing tips into consideration, but I can't finish my chances. This is where I say to you, have you been looking for the extra pass? The 100% chance to score the goal, and a lot of the time people do not. If you guys want to improve your finishing ability in EAFC 24, you need to look for the extra pass. A lot of people get excited, their eyes open up wide, and they see the goal, they've got an eye for goal, and they want to take that shot instantaneously. The trouble with that is there's no composure, and if they actually looked around and be less tunnel vision, they will actually find a player who is open, who can score that 100% chance, open goal chance, when it comes to finishing in EAFC 24. So if you want to increase your finishing chances, look for the extra pass. When there's a player in a better position to take the shot, you should look for them and pass to them and allow them to get the shot off away from the defender's block and in a better position where they can get the strike off past the keeper. Chip shots, I mean, are they as overpowered as previous years? Remember the dink up chip overpowered technique in FIFA 21? What a nightmare that was. But is there anything alike this year? No, there is not. Chip shots are rather standard, and when it comes to keepers coming out towards you, the chip shot is a rather viable technique to score. But are they something that you can abuse like in previously years, including FIFA 21? No, they are not. To perform a chip shot, though, for those who don't know, it's just L1 or LB if you're on Xbox, and then you're pressing the shoot button, and they will dink the ball over the keeper. I recommend not too much power, because a lot of people have trouble actually timing the amount of power that they should have on a chip shot, and they will overcook it. A lot of the time it will go over the bar. You need to have around maximum 2 bars to 3 bars of power when it comes to chip shots. And obviously it will depend on how far you are away from the bots, but if it's too little power, the keeper will sweep it up. If it's too much, it will go over the bar. So you need to time it. You need to judge depending on how far you are away from the goal. But as a standard key for you to follow, it's around 2 to 3 bars of power. Scoring headers in the EAFC 24. What I will say is crossing is actually rather effective. The German cross is back. I'll get into that a little bit later. And some corner techniques that I'm going to outline for you later on in the tutorial are rather effective, which means headering is still existent within the game. It's not a game like, let's say, FIFA 22, where crossing wasn't the most viable way of scoring. It was more about passing. But this year, crossing is a viable way, because if there's someone open at the back post, they're, let's say, positioned in between 2 defenders, the likelihood of them actually getting the header away is rather high. When it comes to headers, I do recommend not using too much power. I find it goes over the bar a lot of the time if you use too much power compared to, let's say, last year, we could use a fair bit. I recommend maybe under 40% of power for the downward header, or around 60 to 80%. So that's around 2 to 3 bars. And the player will header the ball the majority of the time if they have decent jumping stats, decent headering stats above the defender, and get the shot off. But it really depends on where you're crossing from, and that's what I was saying. It has to be determined as to where your attacker is, and if he's in between 2 defenders, that's a good situation and a good chance that you will be able to win the header over your opponents. You have to jump higher. Now this is interesting, because in previous years the way you would jump higher than the opponent, let's say in FIFA 19, was you would hold the power button down, and the amount of power you loaded up on the shot will determine how high the actual attacker would jump. It's not the case. And the reason why is because EA Sports changed the triggers from the low driven shot from L1 and R1, and they've changed it to the power up shot, which means for low drivens you need under 40% of power for a low driven to come off. So people can't load up the power button and hold L1 and R1 when it comes to headering, because it won't be a downward header, it'll be an over the bar blasted header. Now, to overcome this, what I will say is it's a situation in the game where your player positioning is much more important than the amount of power that you hold on the header. And I say this in a different segment because people get confused from previous tutorials that I've made in previous years, where I've said the amount of power you hold determines how high the attacker will jump. So I wanted to make myself clear in this segment. You shouldn't rely on just crossing for the sake of it and trying to score headers, only because that downward header feature is no longer existent with the L1 R1 triggers, and you can't jump as high as defenders, especially if the attacker is right next to the defender. So the player positioning is much more important. Finesses outside the bots. Finesses outside the bots. I've got FIFA 20 nightmares, if I'm honest with you, simply because finesses outside the bots back in the day were rather effective and hard to stop. It's actually similar this year. I've found that finesses outside the bots, when you are on the edge of that 18-yard bots and you're towards the corner of it, if you finesse with around 2 or 3 bars of power and you green time that shot, it goes in the majority of the time. They're very effective, and that's exactly it. If you're in that position that I just outlined for you, it's around the edge of the 18-yard bots and towards the corner, your player will finesse into the top corner the majority of the time. Obviously, there are determinant factors, including whether you're under pressure, how much power you put on the shot, and whether you could green time that shot. But if you're in that position, it's very similar to how you're winning headers. As I said, winning headers and scoring them and jumping above the defender is really determined by the position of the attacker that you're crossing into. It's very similar with long shots. If your positioning is in a good position, in a sweet spot area, you will score a lot of the time. So yes, finesses are outside the bots, and it's going to be very important for us to learn how to defend them. And of course, your boy is going to have a complete defending tutorial coming out for you guys once this complete attacking tutorial is up. Long shots. My God, I remember playing the beta against Mark 11, runner-up of the E-World Cup in FIFA 23, and he scored an absolute banger with the power-up shot from at least 30 yards out. So it really had me realizing, wow, long shots in this game together with finesses outside the bots are super effective. Now, you could power up a regular shot, but the likelihood of the keeper saving it is rather high, as well as the likelihood of you missing the actual shot. But if you can lace one with the power up shot technique with L1 and R1 and the shoot button, you can aim it correctly, the power up shot and long shots in general will go into the back of the net. They will bang in this year, and keepers have a very hard time saving them. Of course, it's very similar to finesses though. The actual positioning of your attacker on the ball needs to be in a viable position to get that shot off, and it needs to be a cross goal. I find near post long shots don't work. We need to focus on that far post, and we need to power up shot around 2 to 3 bars of power, potentially 3.5 depending on the distance you are, for it to go into the top corner. But I think it's appropriate to insert a disclaimer for you guys. When I go ahead and I encourage long shots in EAFC 24 within this complete attacking tutorial, people take that as an invitation to smash in long shots, game in, game out, doing them in every single chance they have. But what I want to say is, if you want to truly improve as a FIFA player, please avoid them. Work it into the bots and find that extra pass. This is how you're truly going to get better. Do you see long shots being 90% of the shots that pro players score in pro tournaments? No, you do not. You see them working it into the bots, finding the extra pass and scoring the 100% goal. Please take this as a note of advice and don't abuse long shots or crosses in EAFC 24. Trivelas are back in EAFC 24, but no, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, they're not like last year. Obviously they were added into FIFA 23, and they were very dangerous at the start of the year, very unstoppable. You could smash in a Trivela shot from outside the box at very acute tight angles, and it would fly into the top corner and keepers would flop down like a sack of potatoes. Fortunately, it's not the same case this year, but they are still a viable technique of scoring. To perform them, you just hold in L2 or LT if you're on net spots. The player will shoot with the outside of their foot, aka the Trivela shot. You can use these inside the box if you get the angle where you're facing up with the far post, or if you're outside of the box and you want that angle for the curve to go the opposite way, if you know that a regular finesse shot with the player that you have on the ball would be hit with his weaker foot. So the Trivela in that case would be the most viable way of shooting, simply because it's the outside of his foot and it's his stronger foot, so it would have a lot more accuracy and power on the shot. As I said, I recommend shooting Trivela shots when it comes to you facing forwards towards the far post, or when you're outside of the box and you're looking for that far post shot with the stronger foot. It is that time of the tutorial where we jump straight into passing. Now obviously this is an absolute staple in the game that we love to call football, and it's a staple in EAFC 24. Your passing plays will determine how good you are as an EAFC player, and that's where I move into passing with tempo. It's one of the most significant aspects to your build-up play and your attack in EAFC. If your build-up tempo was slow and lethargic and dawdly, well then you will get squeezed out by a better opponent. Your attack needs to have fast tiki-taka tempo when it comes to your passing. Number one, when you do this, you're a lot more unpredictable. The opponent cannot adjust his defense so much so that he's able to react to your passes. It also opens up further passing angles for you, which means you have passing lanes opening up for you the quicker you are. So building up with a quick tiki-taka tempo, first time passing, is super important. Now when it comes to passing, it's safe to say that it's very similar to last year in some aspects. Not with through balls, and I'll get into that after, but I will say regular ETS-A passing is the meta, along with driven passes. You want to focus more on using regular ETS passes when it comes to short tempo passing. But for passes that have a rather large distance between the ball passer and the receiver, the driven pass is the most viable option. Moving into driven passes, I do want to say they are more meta than last year. They are super effective. They lock on to your attacker, and boy oh boy do they remind me of FIFA 21. They are so effective that if you're at a far distance and there is a slight gap between the defensive line, you will hit that attacker that you desire when you hit a driven pass. And they are so overpowered this year in EAFC 24. When it comes to passing, I had to add this segment in. You must face to the direction that you are wanting to pass. If you don't, the passing accuracy goes down and ball speed lowers simply because your player is not facing towards the ball receiver. Your body shape is one of the most significant aspects of passing, and I'll get into a little bit later on the insignificance of taking a touch towards the direction so that you set yourself up for the next pass, which is super important for your build-up play. But what I want to say is focus on your body shape and ensure that when you're passing, you guys are facing towards the desired direction of passing. The Trivela lob. It was so effective last year in FIFA 23. It would lock on to any player that you desired, and it was the most viable technique of switching the play. But what I want to say is it's not as effective this year in EAFC 24. It doesn't seem to be something which you can hit and it will lock on to the opposite attacker. It doesn't curve as much, and the accuracy of the Trivela lob isn't as high, but what I will say is it is still a viable technique of crossing the ball in to the far post if you desire to have an outside of the foot cross, which gives you that angle and gives you that extra curve. Or if you're looking to switch the play, it is still a viable technique to take it from left to right or right to left when you're building up from the back line. 1-2 and triangle passes. Now we're getting into more advanced passing plays with this particular technique. 1-2s are very important. When you pass and you hold in L1, the player will pass the ball and make a run. This can be rather effective for creating movement and, as I was saying before, increasing the tempo and attacking speed of your builder. It's very effective if you want to also pass around the defender in a triangle fashion. You might perform an L1 pass, making the initial passer of the ball make a run around the defender. You can then pass to another attacker in a triangular shape and then pass back to the initial passer. What this will do is allow you to play around a defender and create more space in behind. And that's what pro players are always doing. They're always searching for triangular passing patterns, triangular passing plays. With this actual vision, you may be able to change your mind in a split second of who you want to pass to in case one of the defenders of your opponent covers the passing lane that you initially wanted. You then have a backup passing angle, a backup passing plan to the opposite direction, which mates up the triangle to the other player, and it will allow you to work your way around defenses a lot better than if you were being more tunnel visioned and you weren't envisioning triangular passing patterns. I think it's definitely important that I move now into passing around press. It's a question that I get asked year in, year out. People seem to always have trouble passing around and getting away from constant pressure and team press. It's funny that I always get this as a query because it sort of delves back into what I was saying before. Your passing tempo and your vision is one of the most significant aspects of getting away from press. If you're too slow and lethargic, unfortunately you will get squeezed the majority of the time. When it comes to getting away from press, it needs to be first time passing and you need to be thinking ahead. Less tunnel vision and first time passing. Think about that when you're trying to get away from press, because if you don't try and dribble through the space and get away from the press that way, you will get squeezed and there'll be nowhere for you guys to go. Now, of course, I'll have a more in-depth tutorial on how to get away from constant pressure coming up in the next few weeks, but for now, focus on your passing tempo, first time passes, and being less tunnel vision. Think ahead and you'll get away from that press. Through balls, my goodness, have they had a revamp. And when it comes to through balls, what I want to say about them this year is they are more manual than they ever have been. If you'd want to perform a through ball this year in EAFC and it's just gone waywall in a direction that you did not attend, that's because EA have made through balls a lot harder to perform. They're more manual in the direction that you point, and there's more of a skill gap with them. Now, what I will say about this is I actually don't mind. I like it. I find it adds that skill gap and it makes people work for the angles that they get when performing a through ball. But if you're just going to tap the through ball button and expect it to go into the direction that you desire, into the path of your attacker, it will not. The power you hold up is important and the direction with the left stick is important. So if you wanted to do a regular through ball, and the player is making a run through, depending on the actual direction he's running and depending on how far he is away, will depend on how much power you hold up with the through ball. And you need to aim the through ball in the exact direction that you desire through the gap, because if you don't, it will go waywall in a complete opposite direction to what you intend. To sum through balls up, you can't be lazy with your aiming and the power that you hold on through balls this year. The driven through ball. Now this is rather significant because remember the driven lob through ball last year where you held in L1 and R1 and it would lob very quickly and hard across the pitch into the path of your attacker? Well, they are no longer like this. In fact, the L1 R1 through ball now is a driven version of the through ball, but it's more curved and it locks on a lot better to your attacker. And if I could summarize them, they're rather overpowered. I would also say this is the more viable way of performing through balls this year in EAFC, simply because they are more effective and they lock on a lot better to the attacker making the run. They curve a lot better too. So if you're attempting to through ball along the line and you want it to fall right into the path of the attacker, L1 and R1 will be the viable technique of performing the through ball, because it will curl along the line and fall into the running line of your attacker. Now, moving on to lob through balls. Are they as manual as regular through balls? No, they are not. They do, in fact, line up a lot better with the attackers when it comes to aiming these through balls. Are they more viable than regular through balls? I would say they are, and it's simple to the fact that regular through balls are harder to aim than lob through balls, and if you're looking to thread it through when there is a defender there putting pressure on you, the likelihood of intercepting that through ball will be very high, but lobbing it will increase your chances of allowing you to get the ball into the pathway of the attacker making the run. And I say this because I have found lob through balls are rather effective. They do lock on very well this year, and if you have an attacker making the run on the line of the defense and you time it right, over the top lob through balls which are performed with L1 or LB if you're on net spots and performing a through ball button, then there will be a very good chance that you'll have the ball floating straight into the path of your attacker. Taking a touch in EAFC 24. When it comes to fundamentals in EAFC or FIFA in previous years, the touch is one of those. If you don't have a touch that's towards the space and away from the pressure, you guys will lose out to the ball the majority of the time because you'll take it directly into the path of the defender. It's such a common mistake. And if you're wanting to keep possession and build up sufficiently, the touch that you take is super important. Now I do want to add in a bit of a tip, and that is do not hold sprint when you're taking the ball in. If you hold sprint, the touch will be way too large and the likelihood of you being tackled will be very high. So when taking the touch in, use the left stick, look directly towards the space and take the ball towards that direction, so it sets you up for a dribble or another pass, keeping your back to the opponent. Now I will briefly delve into dribbling a little bit later on in this video, but what I do want to say is keeping your back to the opponent is one of the most significant aspects of keeping the ball, and when taking a touch, this will determine as to whether you guys will lose the ball or keep it. Not only do you need to take the ball to space, it needs to be in the direction which your back is towards the defender. If you take it towards the defender, you'll get tackled. But if you take it into the space and keep your back to the opponent as you take the ball in, then he'll have no chance of winning the ball back. Rushing versus tempo. I wanted to add a brief segment on this into this complete attacking tutorial simply because people get confused when I say these terminologies together. Don't rush, but I want you to pass with tempo. They think, well, you wanted me to pass quick, not lethargic, tick-a-tacker passing, but you wanted me to not rush and you wanted me to slow down. Well, yes, that's exactly it. And when I say don't rush, what I'm actually meaning in turn is don't rush the ball forwards in the attack. Don't pass forwards, attempting to get on goal as quick as you can. Pass backwards, take your time, but in the process of taking your time with the build up, be quick with it. Find passes as soon as you can, take a touch into space and pass off to the next player. And do tick-a-tacker first time passing when it is possible. This in turn makes you more unpredictable, and it's not necessarily rushing if you're going backwards. You're keeping the ball. You're having high tempo in your attack. No, rushing is when you're trying to get on goal as quick as you can and passing forwards, which in turn causes you to lose the ball. So don't get confused by these terminologies. Pass with tempo, build up with quick tacker passing, but don't rush forwards. First time passes. Now I did briefly go into this, but I did want to do a more standalone segment on passing, because essentially with first time passing, it is one of the most significant aspects of an attack that I see when it comes to distinguishing a high caliber pro player from a casual player. Casual players dawdle around, they dribble here, they dribble there, they're very lethargic with their build up. Pro players, there's a lot of first time passing, a lot of high pace, build up, tick-a-tacker passing, and first time passing when it comes to pros building up. And to first time pass, it may already be fairly obvious to you, but you need to pass before you receive the ball and point the left stick to the direction that you desire and the direction that you want to pass next. This will cause the player not to take a touch, but to pass it first time, which is what you need for high tempo, tiki-taka, high caliber build-up play. As we know, skill moves are one of the most significant aspects of enhancing your attack, but the trouble is people do fall into the trap of either skilling too much or worrying too much about skill moves before learning the fundamentals in the game. I do highly recommend learning the intricate fundamentals of EAFC, including touches, dribbling, passing, and alike, to essentially get a better grasp of the game before worrying too much about skill moves. But following this segment is going to outline 5 skill moves that you guys should learn if you're wanting to implement skill moves into your game in EAFC 24. Just an extra tip though for you is when it comes to performing skill moves, you always need to take a skill move into the space. It's similar to dribbling, similar to taking a touch. If you skill directly into the path of the defender, you will get tackled. You need to look at where the space is and hit the skill move towards that space. First up, the step over. What a skill move this is. And when it comes to the step over speed boost, yes, indeed, it is back. Now to perform it, you enter in with the right stick forwards to where the player is facing, and then you rotate around to the side of him, either right or left, and then you're using the left stick to point to the direction that you want to exit. So you perform the step over and then you point the left stick to where you want to go afterwards. Okay, now you do need to let go of the left stick as you do rotate that right stick around to perform the step over, and then you want to point the left stick towards where you want to go. Now when it comes to the step over speed boost, you need to point towards a forward facing direction of where the player is running, and then as he's performing the skill move, or just after as he's performing the step over, you need to hold in R2 or RT if you're on net spots to sprint in that direction. And what will happen is a step over speed boost, which is rather hard to defend against if your opponent does not anticipate it. The ball roll, what a skill move this is. It's a staple in every year, and it's something that you guys need to learn because it allows you to take the ball away from the defender into space. And that's, for me, why the ball roll is one of the most significant skill moves that you guys need to learn, and if not the first skill move that you need to learn. Now to perform it, you just point the right stick either to the left or to the right of where the player is facing. He will ball roll towards that direction with his tads on his boot, and you guys can take the ball into space. So good to take it away from defenders, and very, very useful for keeping possession. The Elastico. Now you do need a 5-star skiller, but we're stepping up the stakes with skill moves, and if you can learn this, it's very, very effective, especially if you want to get space in the box to get a shot off or take the ball very quickly with a right footer to the left, or if you have a left footer, it takes the ball very quickly to the right. It's almost a flip-flap motion with the player, and he will take it very quickly to the side. Now to perform it, you need to point the right analog stick towards the right of where the player is facing. Okay, that's where he's facing. Not to the right of where you're facing, but where the player is facing, and then rotate it around to the back of him. And he will perform the Elastico. Very, very effective skill move, especially after a stop. It's so quick and hard to tackle. It goes the same with the Reverse Elastico. I just had to add it in because it's a very similar situation where it's very, very snappy and quick. And if you have a 5-star skiller, it's definitely one for you guys to learn and implement into your attacking game, especially inside the box. To perform it, it's just the opposite motion to the Elastico. So you enter into the left of the player and then rotate around to the back of him. Okay, so it's to the left of where he's facing, okay, and then around to the back of him. And that will allow you to perform the Reverse Elastico. The Mcgeady spin cancel. It is a skill move cancel, but my goodness, is it effective this year? And I find that if you're in a position where you want to, let's say, exit out to behind you and there's space behind you. The Mcgeady cancel is very good at facilitating that. And to perform it, you need to perform a Mcgeady spin, which is forwards and then to the side of the player. So you flick forwards, you then flick to the side of him. And then you want to cancel it with L2 and R2 and point the left stick to the direction that you want to exit. As I said, the most viable direction to exit is behind him, but you can do any direction after performing the Mcgeady cancel with the left stick. You do need a 5-star skiller for this, but it's super effective and it's very, very quick off the back of performing this skill move. Now, of course, you can combine skill moves. It wouldn't be a complete attacking tutorial without mentioning this. You can do skill move combos, including, let's say, the ball roll scoop, which is probably one of my favorites, and that's the only one I'm going to teach you in this complete attacking tutorial, because there are many skill move combinations, but they will be uploaded throughout the duration and iteration of EAFC 24. But the ball roll scoop for me is the most effective skill move combo for you guys to perform. You basically perform a ball roll and then perform a bait shot straight after, and if you have a 5-star skiller, he will ball roll and then will do a scoop turn. Now, you perform the ball roll by pointing the right stick towards the side of where the player is facing, and then you're obviously performing a fake shot, which is cross or shoot. And then you press pass afterwards and you point the left stick towards the direction you want to scoop. He will ball roll scoop, and it's so effective for creating space in the box, but also taking the ball away from the approaching defender, and then ball roll scooping into space. And it's so quick and hard to read. Skill move passes. I just had to add this in because I find this year in the EAFC 24 that passes subsequently after a skill move are more accurate. That's right. If you perform a skill move and then pass straight afterwards, it seems to lock onto the attacker that you desire to pass to a lot more often than just a regular pass itself. Now, the best skill move pass that I have noticed this year is the actual step over pass. If you perform a step over and as you're performing it, pass the ball, he will put his foot around the ball and then pass quickly subsequently afterwards, and it essentially locks on to the attacker that you desire a lot quicker and a lot more accurately. The ball roll pass is yet another one that I wanted to mention, because the ball roll pass is super effective for creating that angle for the pass. You know how you have the attacker that you're wanting to pass into in a direction that's quite tight and acute, but you don't know how to hit him? Well, if you perform the ball roll and then pass straight afterwards, not only does it add more unpredictability to your attack, more movement on the ball, but it also increases the accuracy and the passing ability of your attacker who performs the ball roll. As I said, skill moves and passes go together like sugar and tea. So, you guys can perform a skill move, any of them, and it will increase the passing accuracy. Left stick dribbling is back. Boy oh boy have I waited for this to return. FIFA 22 was a great year for me because, not to float my boat, but I would say dribbling is one of my fortes. It's one of my strongest suits when it comes to high caliber pro games, and I've always been complimented on how good I can dribble. Last year in FIFA 23 it was a disaster. Dribbling was basically eradicated and passing was the meta compared to dribbling. But this year it's back and you can actually dribble away from tackles quite sufficiently. Now, to left stick dribble, you want to be rather light on the actual movement of the stick, but to turn very quickly you do need to chop it and you need to flick it towards the direction that you're wanting to turn. If you flick and chop and you go completely the opposite direction that you want to turn and you hold the left stick all the way, he will turn very quickly. But if you're looking for very light and intricate touches on the ball, the lighter you are on the left stick, the lighter the touches will be. So it actually is rather reactive to how you're maneuvering the left stick. And that's what I love about it. If you're wanting to feint an opponent, chopping it is the most viable option. But if you're wanting to be very light and reactive to what your opponent is doing when he's defending you, then being light on the stick is rather viable. Now, there will be a complete dribbling tutorial and I will teach you the ins and outs of beating opponents and essentially getting away into space and essentially dribbling like a pro. For now, I do want to talk about draft dribbling. In my opinion, they've been nerfed. They are not viable. They are not usable. I highly recommend sticking to regular left stick dribbling this year. Don't even bother with Strafe dribbling. They're very lethargic, very slow, and non-reactive to the defender that's approaching, which means you can't turn away as quick. I've found left stick dribbling is just as effective, and if you can focus on that as a fundamental in EAFC 24, then you'll prevail with dribbling this year. Always keep your back to the opponent. It's funny because a lot of people, when they're dribbling, they seem to think that they're going to be able to beat the opponent who's approaching them, the defender that's approaching them, without keeping their back to them. This is a recipe for disaster, because if you're dribbling straight into a defender, the likelihood of you guys actually defending it will be very, very low. Always keep your back to the opponent when you are dribbling. He can't get the ball off you, and if you're lighter on the stick and you're maneuvering and reacting to him trying to wrap around you and tackle you, you will get away, you will take the ball into space, and you will make it impossible for your opponent to tackle you. Now, I do briefly want to get into a technique that I did only keep for my coaching academy, the clients that I coach in FIFA 23, 22 and 21, and that was the skiing analogy. Skiers, when they are skiing down a hill, are not focusing on the trees, they're focusing directly on the path. If they focus on the trees, their hand-eye coordination naturally swerves them towards the tree, and it's very similar. It resonates with dribbling in EAFC 24. Focus on where the space is. If you focus where the space is, you're going to be able to take the ball into space and keep the ball a lot of the time. You do obviously need to look at the defender, let's say 20% of the time, to see where he is at and to see whether you've made him commit or not. But you need to primarily focus on the space, which I find a lot of people don't do, and it's super crucial for dribbling in EAFC. You know how sprinting is an issue, because if you sprint, the touch that you take can be way too large, and essentially your player will be more susceptible to having the ball tackled off him. There is now a sprint dribbling technique which allows you to keep the ball in tight to you, aka R1 dribbling. And this can be performed, as I was saying, by holding in R1 as you're dribbling. And you can alternate between all three techniques. Use regular left stick dribbling, dribble throughout the space. If there's a lot of space to exploit, you may want to tap the R2 button to burst into that space and tap it into the hole that you're trying to exploit. But then you have R1 dribbling. If there are still defenders around you, and you would be more susceptible to having the ball tackled off you if you were to regular sprint, then R1 dribbling is the technique for you. And all you need to do is hold in that R1 button as you're dribbling. The player will start sprint dribbling, almost like Messi does when he's on the ball and he's starting to dribble at defenders to beat them one-on-one. You can do this, keep it in tight to you, exploit the gap, exploit the space that has been left open, whilst keeping tight control in with the ball. Recycling the ball. Wow, what an attacking technique this is. It is an absolute staple year in, year out, and so crucial to scoring more goals in EAFC. What recycling the ball entails is you taking the ball to the wing and dragging the defense out there. And this comes into play when you're using wide formations. Let's say, for instance, the 4-2-3-1. If you build up the ball out wide, eventually when you get down towards the corner flag or the sideline, the opponent's defense will have dragged out to that side, and it will have opened space and gaps in the center of the pitch. That's how football works, and that's how EAFC works and the AI. If you can drag the defense out, it will be very hard for your opponent to actually defend you when you open up that space and all those gaps in the center of the pitch and in the 18-yard box. So what you're wanting to do is build up out wide, get down towards the side, and then recycle into the middle to score more goals. And if you're struggling to score goals, I highly recommend trying this attacking technique, and you guys will prevail. Player lock, one of my most favorite attacking techniques or aspects to use in EAFC. It's so effective. And what I find is with through balls, they lock on a lot better. You know how through balls are more manual this year? Well, if you play a lot the player and you make him make that run in behind, then, well, it will lock on the majority of the time. Now, to perform player lock, you need to press in the R3 and L3 buttons at the same time. And what this will do is activate player lock you will then be able to flick the right stick towards an attacker that you want to then control. Once you flick to that attacker, the player on the ball will be the AI and you will have control of the player that you selected. You can then start running around with him and make a run, okay, or coming off for the ball depending on which situation you're in. Majority of the time I find the most effective way of using player lock is making a run, and you can make a run along the defensive line and then put through a through ball or a regular driven pass, and the player will receive the ball in. I find it's very effective, and it's an attacking technique that you guys most certainly need to implement into your game because it is super crucial for breaking down defenses and creating movement in your attack. I had to add in the player lock fake because as we have the basics outlined in this video, we also have more advanced techniques, and the player lock fake is something pros are doing all the time. They're performing the player lock, selecting a player, pretending to make them make that run in behind to then force the opponent to track that runner, which then creates space and gaps for the pro player to exploit because the opponent's focused on the runner, not the player on the ball. You can then switch back to the original ball carrier without passing to the runner by pressing down R3 and L3 again. And what that will do is cause you to go back to the ball carrier, the original player that you had the ball with. And this is very effective for creating space because, as I said, the opponent will be focusing on the runner, not the ball carrier. You can then run into that space that's available, and that for you is the player lock fake, which is very effective in EAFC. Using player lock to take the player away from the defender. It's similar to what I was saying before, how you can have actual player offer for the ball. But if you're struggling for passing options and you need someone to come towards the ball, you can use the player lock to do so. You can select an attacker, let's say the striker, and bring him away from that defensive line. Not only does it drag that centre back out to follow the player lock striker, but it basically opens up space because you're dragging that centre back out of his position. It's actually very, very effective, and you'll see pro players do this all the time. That does bring me into triggering runs. It's funny, people come to me and they go, well, I don't have any movement in my attack. They're all stationary. Well, do you actually know how to trigger a run? Probably not. The way you do it is you tap L1 or LB if you're on outspots, and you point the left stick towards a player that you want to make a run. And that will cause him to start running in behind the defense. It's quite good if you wanted to do a German cross, let's say, or if you're just wanting to through ball in behind to that player. But also that leads me into coming to receive the ball. There's a technique where you tap R1 and you point the left stick towards a player that you want to come towards the ball, and he will start running towards you and give you a passing option. This will give you more movement in the attack and in general allow you to break down defenses, and just in general give you more options when it comes to passing in the EAFC. Triggering two runners. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but if you quickly point the left stick towards one attacker that you want to make a run and then another attacker, what it will do is cause two attackers to start making a run, and you can almost use one of them as a decoy, which is the beauty about this. It can be dangerous if you're sending too many on a run though, because it will leave you susceptible in the defense. But if you're looking to add more movement into your attack, sending two runners on a run can be a viable technique. This goes the same with coming towards the ball. If you do want more options, and let's say create yourself a triangle passing option between the two players and the passer, then triggering two runners to come towards you with R1 or RB is a viable technique of doing that. Overlapping runs. This is actually a rather significant attacking technique that you guys want to implement into your attack in EAFC, simply because movement on the wing can be very beneficial, especially if it's, let's say, your wing back making a run, an overlapping run past the winger. And you could of course trigger that with L1 or LB if you're on out spots, whilst pointing the left stick towards the wing back whilst you're on the ball with your winger or with your midfielder. And then you can essentially build up and time the passes that you're doing to line up with the runner. So you can pass from the winger, let's say, to the midfield, or midfield to the winger, and then pass back. And as you're doing this, you can essentially build up and time the run of your wing back so that you can put him through once he has done that overlap and get him behind. Shielding. Now this is rather interesting because in previous years, let's say FIFA 18, shielding was so effective. Now it was still viable in previous years and even in EAFC, but is it something that you should spam when you're in trouble on the ball and you're worried that the defender's going to take the ball off you? No, you should really focus on your dribbling and dribbling to the space and keeping your back to the opponent. But shielding can help you in times when you think you're about to get muscled off and the defender is rather larger than you and you're wanting to at least shrug him off for a little bit longer whilst you keep the ball and dribble back into the space. Which then makes me move on to when you're in behind. Shielding can be very effective when you're in behind because there will be times when your attacker is running in towards goal and the defender is catching you. You can briefly tap the shield button, and I say briefly because if you hold it, a lot of the time the player will try and stand his ground too much and it will cause him to lose momentum on the run when it comes to running in behind. But if you just tap it, and you need to time it, but if you just tap it as that defender approaches the body of your attacker, he will then nudge him off slightly and it will allow you guys to keep running in behind. So don't hold it when you're running in behind, just tap it and that will be a game changer for you. That brings me to holding up the ball, one of the most significant aspects of your attack in EAFC. When holding up the ball, it is so important that you're dribbling back into the space, very similar to what I mentioned before about dribbling, but you're wanting to take it back into the space and keep your back to the opponent, and that's what holding up the ball entails. It's taking it back into space, which in turn makes your opponent follow you, and then it creates more space for you because you're dragging his centre back out of position and allowing the attackers to run into those holes. This is when also you can use shielding to essentially hold the ball up because you'll be able to shield off the defender as he is getting onto you, and it will buy you a little bit more time whilst you wait for those runners to keep running through. Moving on into crossing. Now obviously it wouldn't be a complete attacking tutorial without crossing, and a lot of people will love this segment because people just seem to love crossing in FIFA in previous years and this year in EAFC. And I'm pretty certain as to why you watching this video loves crossing is because it's an aspect of hope. It's the easy way of getting the ball into the box and attempting to score. But the trouble with it is there is no control. So as a disclaimer, a pre-disclaimer, before I delve into all crossing techniques, I still only recommend you guys focus on dribbling, passing, taking touches, and building it up and getting it into the box rather than crossing, because that is how in turn you'll become a better attacker in EAFC rather than just relying on crossing the ball in and hoping your attacker is going to get on the end of it. With that being said, as I said before, it is super important that when you're crossing, the player positioning is crucial. You need to ensure that the attacker that you're crossing to is in between two defenders and he's not being marked. If he's being marked, the likelihood of the defender clearing it is very high. But if he's in between them, it will be very easy for you guys to pick him out as long as you have enough power on the cross. And I would say if he's in at least that mid position, let's say the 18-yard box area, around 2.5 bars of power is all you'll need. If he's closer to you, it might just in turn require a 1 bar power cross. But 2 bars to 2.5 bars is the majority of the time the amount of power that you'll need. The lob cross, again, it's a cross where you essentially will dink it. It goes a lot higher than a regular cross and you hold L1 to perform it whilst pressing the cross button. The player will dink it, and the majority of the time this can be a very, very viable technique to cross when you're looking at crossing to an attacker at the back post. It's very high, very lobbed, and a lot of the time you'll be able to pick out that attacker. And if he's got high jumping stats and good headering stats and good physicality, the likelihood of him rising above the defender will be rather high. You can then try and header it into the back of the goal. The R1 dribbling cross, brought to us by Alexander Arnold. What a man. But Essentially, if there is an attacker at the far post or even near post that you want to hit very directly, barely any curve, but you want to essentially hit him very quickly, the driven cross is very effective for that. And to perform it, you hold in R1 and press the cross button, and it will fly into the pathway of the attacker that you desire, and it is super effective this year. If you have an open attacker at the far post or near post and you want to hit him directly, hold in R1, hit the cross button, and it will be super hard for your opponent to tackle and block, and it will the majority of the time fly into the pathway of your attack. Again though, I do want to mention it does come down to player positioning. You do need to ensure he's free, because if there is a defender marking him, it most likely will not reach his vicinity. The low driven cross, my goodness, what an effective cross this is, but it is actually a very viable technique of crossing if you have a free attacker. There can't be any defenders inside, and this is a very, very viable technique of crossing if you're, let's say, counter attacking and the winger is on the ball and you're wanting to drive that ball very low and hard across the pitch and across the goalkeeper. This is a very, very viable technique of creating yourself a tap-in opportunity, because it is super quick and super hard for the keeper to grab because of how quick and direct it is. To perform it, you just double tap the cross button, and that allows you to drive it very low and hard across the pitch into the path of your attacker. The German cross, I mean, it wouldn't be a crossing tutorial or segment without the German cross, brought to us in FIFA 22, and what a nightmare it was. It was picked up in a pro game, and then it took the FIFA community by storm. To perform it, you essentially want to have an attacker or even a defender or midfielder make a run from deep in behind. And you do that by, as I've taught you earlier on in this tutorial, tapping L1 and pointing the left stick towards the attacker you want to make a run. You then want to time it, but as the attacker starts to approach the defensive line, you want to pass it to your wing back. It was in the position of around halfway between the halfway line and the corner flag, and from this you will be able to cross with around 3 bars of power, and it will curve and lock on into the path of the attacker that you caused to make a run. And yet again, I'm sorry to say it, it's still overpowered and broken, like previous years in the EAFC. A bit of an extra tip though for you guys: the body positioning of the wingback or the actual crosser is very important. You need to be parallel to either the byline or the sideline, because if you're not and you're facing directly towards the attacker or the defender making the run, it will be more of a lobbed cross and not a curved cross. And the curve is what causes the cross to lock onto the attacker. And that's only performed you are facing parallel to the lines on the pitch. That brings me into set piece situations. I'm actually going to combine both free kicks and corners into this segment. And the reason being is because people will always fall victim to trying to score free kicks and score from corners. Now I know you might be lined up with a corner or a free kick, and it is super tempting to take that shot or make that cross. But what I want to say about these situations is you guys should be playing short. The reason being is it basically links to what I was saying at the very beginning of this tutorial. Your guys' ability to build up the attack and get the ball into a crucial goal scoring area is the most important aspect of your attack in EAFC. And how do we do that? It's from playing it short and working it into the box. By crossing, we then limit our ability to work it into the box, and it's a hope situation. You're crossing in and you're essentially hoping that your attacker will get on the end of that header. It's the same with free kicks. You're lining the free kick up and you're hoping that that shot goes into the back of the net. But if I work the ball into the box and I find an extra pass into a player who is more free, then that's a higher chance, higher percentage goal. And to summarize, EAFC and FIFA all along has always been about percentages. What's the percentage of you scoring this goal? And free kicks and corners are quite low. So increase your percentages, work the ball into the box, and score goals that way. I am going to add a disclaimer though. There is a way that you guys from the free kick can enhance your ability of working the ball into the box, and that is the run over technique. If you tap R1 and L2 or RB and LT if you're on Xbox, it will call two attackers short. You can then hold either L2 or R1 to cause one of them to make a run over the ball if you perform a fake shot. They'll run over over it, you can then aim towards them and press pass. This will make them run into the bots and you'll be able to pass into their path for you to get a better angle for the shot. And that is a very viable technique of allowing you to work it into the bots and increase your percentages. Attacking throw-ins, I was skeptical about adding this in and not just doing a standalone tutorial for this, but I thought it's not a complete attacking tutorial without this, and you can actually score more goals from throw-ins, believe it or not. If you're quick and when the scene changes from when you do the throw-in, you guys can use the right stick to select an attacker who's on the defensive line and then quickly run him in behind. Because there's no offsides with throw-ins, if you're quick enough, you will get in behind from this, and I'll tell you, I have scored plenty of goals from this technique. It is viable and I highly recommend it. Timed finishing. There will be a complete timed finishing tutorial for you guys on the channel for EAFC, simply because I could do a whole video standalone on this topic, but I did want to do a short but sweet segment on time finishing. It is back and it is more crucial than ever. It will increase the accuracy and it will increase the power of your shot, and I highly recommend it. Time finishing is essentially you guys pressing shoot and then pressing shoot again and timing it as the player's foot rises up and connects with the ball. So you press shoot, the player's foot rises up, and as he connects, you press shoot again. If you are late with the shot, it will come up as white, and if you do it a little bit too early, it will come up as yellow. The way you should practice this is in kickoff. Create yourself many situations where you can practice time finishing, and then you essentially want to try and time every situation you're in. Eventually you'll get a feel for it, and I did want to create a segment on this standalone, which it's a perfect opportunity to move into right now, and that is getting a feel for time finishing. You guys need to get a feel for it. It's not a situation where you mentally can tell yourself, okay, his foot is rising up and I'm about to hit it now. No, it's too quick for you guys to mentally process that. It's about getting a feel, and you'll know from practicing this technique time and time again of how long it will take before you need to press shoot again. So keep practicing and you'll eventually get it. Driving towards the byline. It's super effective and it's a viable attacking technique in real football and in FIFA. There will be times when you are running in behind with your winger, and there'll be a time when you can drive towards that byline. Doing so will create you guys many different attacking situations, whether that's a ball line, and I'll get into that very shortly, or whether that's just a simple cutback. A lot of the time people don't use the byline to their advantage and they just turn back and try and come back around. You guys need to, because it will open up opportunities for you to pass inside to an attacker showing for the ball and perform an extra pass for that shot on goal. So drive towards the byline with the sprint button and look for your options. It does bring me into the ball line, which was essentially found by myself in FIFA 22. It's an effective, overpowered way of passing along the line if you see an attacker making a run towards the byline. And you can be around the corner flag area, and if you see that attacker on your opposite side of the defender on you, running towards that line, pass along it, and every single time it will lock onto him. It's a very good way of getting the ball from the width area into the center of the pitch and creating yourselves tap-in opportunities, because there will always be a player there ready to receive the ball and get that shot off. Last but not least, I think it is important, and it wouldn't be a complete attacking tutorial without talking briefly about formations and custom tactics. Now, although I'm not going to do a complete in-depth segment on tactics and formations, what I want to say about these is it is about getting a feel for what works for you, because what formations work for me may not work for you, but what works for you may not work for me. I do want to say though is attacking formations that you guys may want to use in EAFC after playing this game countless hours is the 4-3-2-1, the 4-4-2, the 4-3-3, or even the 4-2-3-1. These formations offer you a variety of attacking options, whether that's up the center with the 4-3-2-1 or up the wing with the 4-3-3. I'll of course have more in-depth custom tactics videos coming out for you guys day in, day out throughout this year and iteration of EAFC 24, which does then bring me into tactics. There are certain attacking tactics that will work better for you in certain situations, including forward runs. I highly recommend this if you're not getting enough movement. Forward runs allow your wingbacks to make more overlapping runs and your attackers and wingers to start making more runs in behind. I do find you get more movement, but then again, it can be difficult if you're not getting enough passing options. So forward runs can be very beneficial, but just watch out. If you feel as though you're not getting enough passing options, then I recommend changing it back to balance. That does bring me into direct passing, which is super crucial for you guys if you're finding you have no passing options open. Direct passing will cause your attackers to come towards the ball and offer you more passing options, but I do want to say there is a balance with it, because essentially your attackers won't be making as many runs in behind, they will be offering for the ball. And that's why I said at the start of this segment, it's so important that you discover what works for you. Do you like more passing options coming towards the ball, or do you like more movement for through balls? It really depends what works for you. It's about you guys discovering this for yourself and utilizing the tactics and techniques that I've taught you throughout this tutorial whilst you discover what works for you. However, that will signal the end of it. What a tutorial this has been. A very long, hard thought out tutorial, but if you did enjoy it, can we smash the like button? If we can smash 500 likes in this first week, I will drop a complete defending tutorial. And I do want to mention I am coaching this year in EAFC. If you want to be one-on-one coached by myself, a pro player, I will teach you the ins and outs of everything I know, take you from the low divisions of Division 10 to Elite, and turn you into the greatest FIFA player that you have ever been. Check it out, the link is down below. But as always, I hope you guys have a good day. I'm out. Sayonara, au revoir, adios, salam ciao, goodbye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. And lastly, if you do want any pre-gaming fuel or supplement, then head over to atpscience.com, which is the first link in the description, and use the code DylanetsATP at checkout to get yourself a discount. Not only is it the cheapest way to get supplements, but it helps me out a ton, guys, so thank you.